security debates, Indo-US bilateral approaches.
Good morning, everyone. I will be speaking to you on contemporary issues in environmental security, Indo-US bilateral approaches. Now, we have all seen emerging debates in non-traditional security issues. Um, Security currently is not understood in the Cold War terms, but there are other aspects to it, such as food, energy, etc. Global climate change, amongst them, is considered a major security threat. The UNEP report released in 2007 at the Bali Conference of Parties analyzed the links between climate change and global security risks. Scholars like Brahma Chalani argue that conflicts, wars would be fought over water. Now, the global climate change discussions are conducted within the UNFCCC framework, and the Kyoto Protocol remains the only legally binding framework to address global climate change. Now, the North-South debate has been an indispensable part of the UNFCCC discussions. Basically, that who should take over the responsibility of battling climate change? Should it be the developed world or the developing world? India and the US being major players in the global arena today, and being US being the second largest emitter and India being the third largest emitter, have tried to converge in many places on environment security. Now, I'll be using this phrase estrangement to engagement with respect to environment security over here. India's stance on climate change can be traced back to a speech made by Indira Gandhi at the 1972 UN Conference on Human Environment held at Stockholm. Now, this conference is happening in the backdrop where the world is realizing that blue whales are becoming extinct. And this is right after when the Americans had sprayed Agent Orange in Vietnam, and they were suffering the implications of that. So Indira Gandhi here notes that, and I quote her here, on the one hand, the rich look askance at our continuing poverty. On the other, they warn us against their own methods. We do not wish to impoverish the environment any further, and yet we cannot for a moment forget the grim poverty of large numbers of people. So at this conference, the US is seen as taking a really resistant stance, but at the same time, to take attention of the really important matters, they invite discussion and whaling. The Montreal Protocol, which came into force, which was signed in 1987, saw for the first time the institutionalization of differentiated responsibilities between the developed and the developing world. The protocol also put in a multilateral fund to help the developing world cope with substitution from CFCs to other forms like HFCs. I think one can say that in principle this translation materialized through the UNFCCC by putting in place what is called the firewall between Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 countries. Annex 1 being the developed world and non-Annex 1 being the developing world. Now at this time, right before, I think a month before Clinton signs the Kyoto Protocol, the US Senate passes the Byrd-Hagel resolution. I do not remember the numbers, it's number versus nil. There was no votes in favor of signing the Kyoto Protocol. Later, after Clinton signs the protocol and takes it back to the Congress, I'm sorry, I said Senate instead of Congress, the Congress still refuses to ratify it. Now, when Bush comes to power, Bush states that the Kyoto Protocol is fundamentally flawed in many ways and then withdraws from it. Looking at instances of engagement, at the Bali COP, where the countries came together to discuss a post-Kyoto framework at Copenhagen, there was a Bali roadmap, if you know about it. Until the last day of Bali, the developed and the developing world were at odds with each other. So India sort of stood up with the other developing countries and strengthened the linking clause which is mentioned under Article 4.7 of the protocol, which mentioned that developing countries would also undertake commitments which are nationally appropriate mitigation actions supported by technology, enabled by finance and capacity building in a measurable, reportable, verified manner. So in essence, one can say that US and India found common ground here to work from. Now at Copenhagen, even though the Copenhagen Accords is regarded as a failure, it saw India and China within the coalition of BASIC, along with the US, emerging as principal architects of the Accords. They essentially got what they wanted at Copenhagen. India and US further converged in Lima with the concept of intended nationally determined contributions, which I'll be talking about later. Looking through the negotiating positions, India's position is regarded as morally strong, while the US position is regarded as a strong reflection of its realpolitik. India stands by the principles of equity, common but differentiated responsibility, as I mentioned before. India says that emission cuts should be based on per capita emissions, that is, energy consumption divided by the population, which is very low for India but higher for Western countries. India says that, well, it would definitely benefit from climate funding and transfer of technology from the West. The US, on the other hand, says that commitment for us is solely dependent on whether commitment is across the board, also for developing countries, and in such a way that it does not affect the domestic economy. The US says that climate financing is not a bottomless pit. Further, to avoid implementing domestic cuts, they resort to flexibility mechanisms, such as CDMs and joint implementation. The Asia-Pacific Partnership on Clean Energy is one of them. Okay, moving on. Looking through convergences and divergences, I'll be looking at convergences first. Both India and the US converge on the fact that there shouldn't be mandatory legal commitments in the post-Kyoto framework. Now, India initially was leaning towards commitments from everyone, but since it's emerging as an economy, as Jairam Ramesh had pointed out at Cancun Conference of Parties, that it needs equitable carbon space for sustainable development. So commitments would not be in the interest of India right now. Both India and the US is in favor of all-inclusive future institution framework. In the sense that, as I mentioned earlier, US is the second largest emitter and India is the third largest emitter. It wouldn't be in the interest of either party that one walks out of the other, and both the parties have made it clear that they're willing to walk out. There are economic opportunities involved for both India and the US, especially in the background where since Modi came into power, we've seen an impressive push for renewable energy in India. So that would be a convergence. Energy security would come in the form of nuclear energy and other forms of renewable energy. HFC phase out is another convergence. In the St. Petersburg G20 summit, Manmohan Singh had signed a joint communique calling upon the developing countries to get to HFC phase out by 2013. When Modi visited the US this time, they agreed upon HFC phase out under the Montreal Protocol while reporting under the UNFCCC framework. This has been seen as a convergence. Further, since most of the HFC substitutes patents are held by the US, this can be definitely in favor of India. Divergences, views on moral responsibility. The US does not accept that the West has to take sole responsibility for cutting down on emissions. Divergences in climate financing. As I said, US has its reservations in climate financing. When Hillary Clinton promised at the Durban COP that $100 billion would be pledged towards climate funds, um, she had said that the US would give $10 billion from 2010 to 20 to make it $100 billion, and from 2020, $100 billion every year. Now at Warsaw, they said that the money would be given to private investments. So it's upon the developing countries to make the climate favorable for climate funding. Technology transfer. There's a major reluctance seen from the side of the US to transfer technology. Further, the US says that India's IPR regime is not in favor of technology transfer. The US does not want the phrase loss and damage to figure in the Paris Agreement, which would happen in 2015. Again, the US does not buy the argument that per capita emissions should be the standard for assigning commitments, which would mean that if they accepted that, they would have to pay a huge price, therefore. I've listed out the bilateral arrangements on environment security. My friend Ramu would be talking to you about energy security later, so I won't be touching upon that. Under the REDD Plus initiative, there's the US-India Partnership for Sustainable Forest and Climate Adaptation Program, basically a reforestation initiative. The USAID India Disaster Support Project. Further, under Modi, when Modi visited the US this time, the US agreed to invest in smart cities in Visakhapatnam and certain other cities. And they also committed to integrating renewable energy to India's power grid. Moving on, it really needs to be seen where the bilateral efforts need to be translated to multilateral efforts. As ma'am was mentioning yesterday, how bilateral, regional and global needs to be in sync. So it needs to be seen whether the bilateral efforts gets translated to the negotiation level where they can converge basically. Impediments to technology transfer, as I've mentioned before, that needs to be addressed. Addressing the fundamental differences, the fact remains that US and India have taken move on different principled stance. So how do you find convergence in that? There's definitely the problem of bureaucratic inertia with bilateral commitments moving forward. Informal veto in the sense that both the countries can walk out whenever they want, and we wouldn't have a climate deal at all. You know of the US-China climate deal that happened end of last year, whereby they agreed to cut down upon emissions to the tune of 20 to 25% from the 2005 levels. So now they have said that, while they've said that there's no such deal in the pipeline for India right now, climate change is one of the major agendas of discussion for Obama's visit sometime. So we really need to look at whether India would be forced to enter into such a deal and whether that would constrain India's economic growth. What happened at Lima? They more or less did away with the firewall in Lima and said that the countries would submit individual pledges for emission cuts. This is what is called involuntary intended nationally determined contributions. Now at Warsaw, they said that the INDC would be subject to ex-ante review by March 2015, but in the countries like India and the US staunchly opposed to it. Now it's come to a position where there wouldn't be any form of review, and the contributions will be voluntary. US-China deal and imperatives for India. It needs to be seen how the current government would take it forward and reap the benefits out of US cooperation in a model where the US cooperated with China in the same way. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
You have closed before time. That leaves at least 5 more minutes for discussion. Now, of the two papers